All right, everyone, if you have a Bible, we're actually gonna be kind of hopping around today, but I'll tell you the first passage that I'll be at. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 12, 1 Corinthians 12. So we are in a series where we're addressing some of the things that cause us to struggle in our relationship with God, in our faith journey. And what we're doing in this series is we're addressing these things head on because we're trying to discover in all of these areas the things that are weak, the things that are untrue, so that we can replace them with things that are strong, things that are true, because we want the final product to be stronger than where we began. And so we've been looking at difficult topics, controversial topics, and today I want to talk about something that has the potential to impact all of us because it's really a relational thing. And it's this, that people who follow Jesus can hurt other people who follow Jesus. If you're part of a Christian community, then there's a chance at some point someone's going to offend you, someone's going to hurt you, someone's going to disappoint you. And one of the tensions of this is that oftentimes what we naturally do when we're a part of the Christian community is we attach people who follow Jesus to Jesus. And so everything that they do becomes a little bit more dramatic because we feel like in some way that's what Jesus is allowing to happen to us. And so when a person who follows Jesus lets us down, it feels like Jesus is letting us down. And so I want to address this tension. But one of the dynamics when we talk about a Christian community, and I just want to pause and kind of put a little disclaimer on, one of the dynamics that can happen in every community is we can be talking about abuse. And I just want to be clear, today I'm not talking about abuse. That is not because it's not important, but because that is a different conversation that requires much more intentionality. It has a lot more nuance to it. But I also want to just pause and address it. Because in my opinion, the Christian community as a whole throughout the generations has oftentimes handled abuse poorly. And I think the Christian community has used grace in an inappropriate way to cover abusers and not to protect the victims. And so I just want to read a quick statement just so that everyone fully understands my view, the church's view on abuse. Abuse is evil. And I would argue it is especially evil when it is done by people who are entrusted to love, protect, shepherd, and care for others. Churches and leaders who abuse people should be confronted, held accountable, and face consequences of their actions. The answer to abuse is never silence, protecting platforms, or pretending it didn't happen. Abuse should always be addressed with truth, justice, and care for those who were harmed. I'm not minimizing that reality in any way this morning. And so I just want to be clear about that. But again, that's a different conversation. And so today, let's address what is our difficult reality. And that is church communities at times hurt people. And this is just simply a dynamic of relationships. In my experience, it is rarely, if ever, intentional. When I talk about it in the sense from the leadership on down, I am friends with just countless amount of pastors, and every single pastor that I know has a genuine heart to love their people well. And so I don't think church hurt, as the term is oftentimes used in our culture, I don't think it's often intentional, but I would say it's common. And so I want to address all the different ways that church hurt happens within a community. And the first one is what I would say is most popular to be addressed in social media in today's culture, and that is this, that church leadership fails the members. And I just want to be clear, when I say leadership, I'm just talking about like the staff, the pastors, the leadership. When I say members, I'm just talking about anyone that goes to a church. And so the most common way that this is addressed is that church leadership fails members. So if you're gonna pull open social media, TikTok, Instagram, look at the reels, look at posts, if someone is hashtagging, putting church hurt, someone's addressing it, more often than not, it's this, that in some way the leadership of the church disappointed them, wounded them, hurt them, did something that frustrated them. And this might surprise you. I'm not in any way trying to explain that away today. I'm not trying to soften it, just the opposite. I actually want to expand it. So this is the first level of hurt that happens. Here's the second, that church members hurt the pastors and church leadership. And here's what I don't want you to hear. I don't want you to hear me go, well, you're saying that we hurt you. I want you to know you hurt me too. Okay, so that's not the energy I have, but this is a dynamic of church. Pastors are leaving the ministry at record numbers. I don't know if you know that, but they are leaving full-time ministry at record numbers. And I'll just tell you, it's not because of the world. It's not because of the outside. It's because of people who call the church home. Because people can be nasty, they can be vindictive, they can be selfish, they can gossip. And so pastors are being hurt. So again, the church leadership hurts the members hurt the church leadership, but it doesn't stop there. There's also church members who hurt each other, where people that go, that are supposed to be friends, that are supposed to love each other, they don't. And again, it doesn't stop there. Also, church leaders hurt each other. And so you see pastors fighting elders and fighting each other. And so just to summarize, the church leadership hurt the people hurt the leadership, the people hurt each other, and the leaders hurt each other. Now, how many of you want to join a church? But this is the reality. This is the reality of every single Christian community. I have been a pastor for 27 years. And I know that shocks you because I don't even look 27, right? But for 27 years, I've been a pastor. And in 27 years, I have witnessed every level of this. In 27 years of being a pastor, I have every single year, without fail, hurt someone. I have disappointed someone. Again, not intentionally, but I know it happens. In 27 years of ministry, I have consistently been hurt by people who called our church home. In 27 years of pastoring, I've seen people turn on each other. And in 27 years of pastoring, some of the people who have been hurt the most used to work for me, used to work with me. They've been hurt by me. And I would say vice versa. The people I've worked with, people that have worked for me, people that I've worked under have hurt me. It is a dynamic of the church, the Christian community. So we just go, okay, so what's our option? So I'm gonna give you 4 options. So option number 1 is you go and you find the perfect church. But how much, we all know that's a problem, right? Because I don't know if you've ever heard this, but they say the difficulty with finding the perfect church is the moment you find it and join it, it's no longer perfect. Right? That kind of stings a little bit when you hear that. I actually expected more laughter, and it was more like, oh. But it's the truth. We know that. It's not even God's plan to try to create the perfect church. God's plan is that he uses broken people to love broken people. So that first option is not really an option. But here's the second one. You go to a church until that church offends you, find another church and repeat. And you can look at that, and I think this is what actually a majority of people do, is that they go to a church, and initially it's like, man, this church is awesome. We love this, we love that. This church is so much different than my last church. And then eventually, the more you're there and the more you're in relationships, eventually something hurts you. Something disappoints you, something frustrates you, and so you go to another church. And here's in my experience, the reason why this doesn't work is in my experience, 1, is because God doesn't want it to work this way, but 2, after 2 churches, maybe 3, people just quit going to church. And the people who continue to go to church and they go from church to church to church, in my experience, they become some of the most wounded and toxic people in churches. And so this option is not really a valid option. Okay, so then there's the third option, which I think has 2 subpoints. And the third option is you quit going to church. And then there's 2 options of this. The first one is the people who quit going to church and they say, okay, but it's now just me and Jesus. And these are the people that would say, I've given up on organized religion. And this has become so popular in our culture. People wear it as a badge of honor. And people who say this oftentimes even view themselves more spiritual than everyone else. I don't need organized religion, it's just me and Jesus. Well, here's the problem with me and Jesus. The Bible doesn't support that concept. You can't find within the scriptures, Old Testament or New Testament, any concept of a relationship with God that's not done in the context of community. Jesus wants you to be a part of community. He wants you to be the part of the body of Christ. He wants you to connect in other relationships. So 1 part of that is not biblical, but 2, it's not healthy. It's not how God has designed you to be. And so then the other option of quit going to church is the people who say, well, then no more Jesus. And I actually think this is the major part of the deconstruction movement in today's world. That when you see people talking about it, it's the former church. They've given up on church. They've given up on Jesus. And the problem is obvious. If you give up on Jesus, you're missing out on the most important person and thing you need in your life. And so you're not healthy or strong. So the first 3 options aren't really valid options. And so what's the fourth? And this is what I want to look at today. That everyone, and I mean everyone, leadership and members, everyone treats the church the way Jesus intended. And when you hear that, this option can potentially sound like what I'm about to do is to blame the people who are hurt for being hurt, but I promise you that's not at all what I'm doing. I'm saying I want everyone. I want to talk to church leadership. I want to talk to church members. And what I want to offer today is what, from studying the scriptures, I see as different than our culture. What we're going to look at today challenges both the leadership and members to think and act differently toward the church. And I think what we're going to see today is the only way to keep our hearts soft and our relationships strong. And so this is where it begins, is we have to pause for a moment and we have to begin viewing the church correctly. Because I think both members and leadership, that their view of the church has become distorted. And I want to be very clear. I think both members and leadership began in a good place, have good motives, but how it plays out has become distorted and therefore hurtful. Because if you actually go back to the beginning of the church, and this is something we just spent about 8 or 9 weeks studying in a series called Unstoppable Force. But when you go back and you see the beginning of the church, Jesus is the one who framed how it was supposed to be. So Jesus one day was having a conversation with his disciples, the men who had dedicated their lives to following him. And at this point, he had sent them out over and over into the community to go and to do ministry, to connect with people, to hear the conversations, to talk with them, to share the good news about who Jesus was. And so one day they were all together and he was basically kind of debriefing them. And he was asking them, who do the people say that I am? And they were naming, like, the people think you're at the bare minimum like a good person. They think you're a good teacher. Some think you're a prophet. And then Jesus asked them the most critical question. He goes, okay, that's who the crowd says that I am, but you've spent time with me for years now. Who do you say that I am? And Peter, who is often the first one to speak, speaks up and says, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. This is a profound statement because the Messiah was someone that had been prophesied through the scriptures for hundreds of years, that the God the Father would send this person to become the savior of his people. And so Peter goes, all of these prophetic words for hundreds of years, the person that we've been waiting for, we believe that you are he, but not just, we're not stopping there. He goes, I believe not only are you the Messiah, but I believe you are the Son of the living God, which means you are God in the flesh. I mean, this is a profound statement because if he's wrong, he's blaspheming and could be put to death. And Jesus' response to him is, Peter, what you just said was not revealed just to you by man. This was revealed to you by God on high. And then Jesus says, on this truth, the truth that he is the hope of the world, that he is the Son of God. He goes, on this truth, I am building my church, what we translate as church. It's ecclesia. It's this idea of a community with a purpose. And Jesus goes, I'm starting something today. I'm starting with you guys, something that is an unstoppable force that's going to change the world. And he goes, not even the gates of Hades, not even death itself will be able to stop this. And so Jesus is the one who started the church. Jesus is the one who had a mindset of what it should look like. And here's where I think the problem happens, is Jesus meant for this to be the ecclesia, this community of people who come together who are different, but they come together in unity to go and to change the world, to take his message of hope to all of those who are lost so that they can be found and enter into a relationship with God. But here's the problem in our culture. In our culture, we have been trained to think of organizations and groups differently. In our culture, we are in a consumer culture, which has trained us to view ourselves as the customer. And so what we naturally do is we view groups and we view organizations as a means to an end. Because we have been trained to view ourselves as the customers, what that means is we have money and other people want to compete for our money or our resources. And so this is the rhythm that we've been trained in. I have resources and I get to leverage my resources in order to get a return. And so when I go to a different place and I spend different amounts of resources, I have different levels of expectation. So just to talk about it in the money sense, if I am hungry and I take some money and I go to a fast food food place, I have this level of expectation for both the service and the quality of food. But if I go to a restaurant, then I'm gonna give more money, and so I have a higher expectation. If I go to a really fancy restaurant, more money, but higher expectation. And then if I go to a retail environment where I'm gonna purchase something based on, again, the level of what I'm going to spend, then I have a different level of expectation. If I go to a car dealership, then obviously I'm gonna drop a chunk of change, and so I really want a higher level of service. And so this is our mindset, that I'm going to give of my resources, but you're gonna give me a product. You're gonna give me a return, and so I have expectation based on what I invest. And so this naturally goes with us when we step into a church, because it is, on one level, an organization. It is not meant to simply be an organization, but on one level, the practicality of it is. It's been organized. People are together. And so what we naturally do is we go, okay, I'm investing my resources here, and so now I have an expectation. But this is where I want to be clear. I think it begins in a really healthy place. It begins in us going to a church with legitimate needs, things that in our lives we know that we don't have, that if we did have, we would be better for it. We desire community, we desire love, we desire safety, we desire grace and encouragement and support in our lives. And we hear the testimonies about churches, and so that raises our expectations. And so we step in, but we just naturally start to do this without anyone even teaching us. We go, okay, I come every week, and just by attending, that means I have some expectation on what I should get. And it doesn't matter if I give anything else, just by attending, I have expectations. But then if I give more, so let's say not only do I attend, but now I serve, higher expectations. And now I connect in community, higher expectations. And now I give of my finances, higher expectation. And what happens is we begin to view the church as a means to an end. And both leadership and members do the exact same thing, just on a different way. And so what members do naturally is they go, okay, I'm gonna give of my resources with an expectation, but when that expectation isn't met, then I'm gonna view you the same way I view every other organization, and I'm gonna take my resources somewhere else. And so this is the distorted view that happens, is members view the church as a service provider, not as the body of Christ, not as a community, an ecclesia, but as a service provider. Let me give you the definition of service provider. A service provider is a person or organization primarily viewed as existing to meet needs, preferences, expectations, or demands of others. And so what happens is we go, okay, the need, it began in a good place. I have these needs, but I expect you to give them. And when they fail, people go, okay, I'm gonna take my resources somewhere else because of a distorted view. But the leadership has the same potential. They're just coming from it from a different perspective. What I think happens with the leadership is oftentimes, in my experience, it begins in a healthy place. They go to God and they're praying, they're saying, God, what do you want for our church? What do you want for our ministry? And so God gives a vision, and they have a clear vision. And oftentimes, I think when done well, the vision puts us in an uncomfortable place because it requires everyone to do their part, requires sacrifice, requires faith. And so the leadership begins in a place going, okay, God's called us to this. This is where we're going. But this is where it gets distorted in leadership, is that church leadership views members as organizational assets. That instead of viewing people as people, they start to look at them as a means to an end. We need all of you to do this, and if you're not gonna get on board with this, then it's natural for churches to start devaluing people, maybe not give them as much attention. And again, I think on both sides begins in a healthy place. But because they view everyone in the middle as a means to an end, it becomes distorted and becomes unhealthy. And so what do we do with this? Well, what do we do with what God's called us to be? Because I realize what I've just described. Let's just be honest. I just described something ugly that no one wants to be a part of. Is that fair? Like some of you are like, get your purse, we're leaving. Because when you hear it actually described that way, you're like, why in the world would anyone want to be a part of that? And I'm thankful, I mean this genuinely. I'm not speaking from a place where I think there's a lot of dysfunction in our church. I'm not speaking from a place where I know there's a lot of division, a lot of hurt being done. And so I'm thankful for that. But yet when we describe it this way, we go, then why do we want to be a part of it? Because of what it can be. Because of what Jesus called it to be. And so today what I want to show you in my time is I want to show you the image that Jesus had. And here's what I'm confident in. When I get done describing this, all of us will want to be a part of it. Because what I'm going to describe today truly is an unstoppable force, but it's an unstoppable force of love and safety and security, a place where you can grow and be discipled and be developed and be supported, but every single one of us has to do our part. And so this is how I'm going to describe it and teach it today. I think in order to do it the way that Jesus planned for it to be done, you need a calling, you need action, and you need response. You need calling, you need action, and you need response. And here's where we're going to begin. Let's talk first about calling. To live out Jesus' way, it begins with viewing the church the way that he intended. And my favorite description of the church, it's actually mentioned this way a couple of times by Paul, but Paul describes it in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. This is where I asked you to turn. 1 Corinthians 12:12. Paul said it this way. He said, for just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. And so let's just stop there for a second. Paul goes, I want you to understand the same way that a human body, and we talk about this a ton as a church, but the same way that a human body is made up of so many different and individual parts that all come together to form one body. So you have things like, your fingers and your hands, and you have your elbows and your knees and like all your body parts, but then you have your cells, you have your nerves, you have your organs, like just all the things that make up a body. He goes, but yet it all comes together and works together for one purpose, being a body. He goes, in the exact same way, this is what Jesus intended his church to be. That there's going to be an incredibly diverse group that's going to come together and they're going to operate as one. And then he goes even further to describe just how crazy this dynamic is. He goes, for in one spirit, we were all baptized into one body. Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and all were made to drink of one spirit. So it's so easy for us to read that and just kind of go over it quickly thinking it's not that big of a deal, but it was. When he says we were all made to be one body, and then he just kind of casually throws in there Jews and Greeks, we need to understand these two groups of people were completely separated from each other and hated each other. The Jews believed that they were God's chosen people, and to come into contact with Greeks or more general Gentiles, that they would defile themselves. So they actually believed in order to come into contact with them, they would actually be sinning. So Jews would never go, a practicing Jew would never go into a Gentile or Greek's home. They would not fellowship with them. They would not have relationships with them. They were separate from them. And the Greeks looked at the Jews really in confusion because they were this isolated group that they didn't fully understand, and they had weird practices, and they dressed differently, and they act differently, and they worship differently, and so they both despised each other. And Paul goes, and yet this is what Jesus did. He took two groups that were confused by each other, that were racist toward each other, that were mad and angry at each other, that mocked each other, and he said, you're gonna come together not just to begrudgingly hang out, but you're gonna become like family. You're gonna come together and you're gonna worship and you're gonna serve together and you're gonna love each other and you're gonna go into each other's homes and you're gonna start as strangers and become acquaintances and then become friends and then become like family. You're gonna become like a body. And then he goes, not just Jews and Greeks, but also slave and free. Again, two different socioeconomic classes that when they related on master-servant level. And he goes, now, what once separated you, you're going to be connected. And in Paul's other writings, he talks about gender being erased and other positions being erased. He goes everyone is going to be treated equally in the body of Christ. And this is what Jesus intended, and I want everyone to hear this. He intended all of us and all of our different backgrounds and personalities, all of the oddities that every single one of us carries with us, all of our different perspectives. He wanted to bring us all together in unity, knowing we are completely different. And how is this possible? It's only possible because of Jesus, because of what he has done for us. This is one of my favorite things about our church. I love that we are diverse. Now, we are becoming more diverse racially, which I'm so thankful for because we are in a limited, racially diverse culture here in Lancaster. But I am glad that we are becoming more diverse in that area. But when you look around, we have people of so many different backgrounds and styles and sense of humors and families of origin, and yet we come together to love and to encourage. And one of my favorite things, this happens periodically. We'll be talking as a staff and we'll be hearing about some connect group and something that they're doing. And I'll pause and I'll go, hey, just real quick, just tell me again who's in that group. And they'll list all the people that are in that group. And I'll just say something along the lines of, where else in the world would you get that group of people together and they be friends? Only in church, only because of Jesus. And this is what Jesus called us to do. And so I'm gonna read a long statement and then I'm gonna give you a short one to explain the calling. But this is a long statement that I want all of us to hear. This was the heart of Jesus. The church was meant to be a group of people with different backgrounds, values, experiences, personalities, beliefs, goals, desires, resources, strengths, and weaknesses being brought together by Christ into a community so deeply connected and committed to one another that they function like a single human body. Amen? This is the image that Jesus had. I want you to hear me. The church was never meant to be a collection of like-minded consumers. What it's turned into, where we focus on ourselves and our wants and our desires, it was meant to be the supernatural joining together of radically different people into this community, this committed community, so united in love and sacrifice and mutual dependence that Scripture describes them as a human body, like one body. The church was designed to bring together people who naturally would never come together. And so the church was meant to be so connected to Christ that people were willing to become interdependent upon each other, that they were willing to actually connect their lives because of their connection to Christ. And this is what the body was meant to be. A couple weeks ago, I had breakfast with a good friend of mine, Pastor Paul Bishop from the River, the church here in town. If you know Pastor Paul, he's just the most gentle, kind-hearted man, and I love my time with him. But if you might not know it, but a year or so ago, he had a massive heart attack and he died, literally died. His heart quit beating for 15 minutes. And he really is a miracle that he's alive and functioning. And he was telling me about the story, and he was telling me about how when his heart started to beat, and then the medical professionals kept telling his wife and his family, just so you know, this is fatal. He will not recover from this. I think the first night he was in the hospital, his kidneys started to shut down, and they told him again, this is fatal. He will not recover from it. The church began to pray, and obviously God did a miracle. He responded, and he's healthy, and which we're so thankful for. But when talking with him, there was one thing that as I was thinking about what took place, is I was like, there's two realities that happened with Pastor Paul. The first one was a supernatural reality. God did a miracle. But the second thing is that his body, his human body, is super resilient. Because when God healed him, he didn't go from being dead to 100% restored in a moment. Though God could do it, he didn't do that with Pastor Paul. Instead, he did something supernatural and got him going in the right direction, but he made his body super resilient so that over time he recovered and now he's strong again, maybe even stronger than he was before. And that image is what I think about with the church, that the church is designed to be super resilient. The church is designed to work together like a human body, to fight against the things that try to attack it, the things that try to weaken it. That we should be in purpose in our minds focused on being united and being healthy, knowing that then God will do the supernatural things that we can't do. And so the calling we have is that, and everyone needs to own this, that I am responsible for helping protect and strengthen the health of the body I belong to. That every single one of you needs to say that to yourself. I am responsible for helping protect and strengthen the health of the body I belong to. A way I've said it for over the years is me healthy, we healthy. My individual health impacts the health of the entire body. And one of the things I'm so sad about, we know this in the physical, We know in the physical that amputation should be the last resort, but in the Christian body, we oftentimes begin there. We get offended, we get frustrated, and so we cut ourselves off from the body and we go somewhere else. And what Jesus is saying, nope, you need to own your calling. And then what does that lead to? Once you understand the calling, it should lead you to action. And the action that I want to look at is something that Jesus said toward the end of his ministry. When Jesus was having what we refer to as the Last Supper, this event that's been made famous by Da Vinci's painting. But when Jesus, was an actual true event, when Jesus was having dinner with his disciples on the night that he would be betrayed and arrested, and the next day he'd be crucified, when he was eating with them and they were heartbroken, they were confused by what was going on. But at the beginning of the dinner, Jesus went around and he washed all of their dirty feet. In that culture, they walked around in sandals. Their feet would get sweaty. They were walking where there was dirt, where animals would go to the bathroom. I mean, it really was a filthy place. And Jesus got down on his hands and knees, and he went to every single disciple, even Judas who would betray him, Peter who would deny him, the other disciples who would scatter and fall asleep. He went to each one of them, and he washed their feet. And they were confused by it, but then at the end of dinner, he says, you know what I did for you? I want you to have that same posture. And I want you to go and to do the same thing for the people that you come into contact with. I want you to have a new calling. And this is how he worded it. This is John 13:34. He says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. So pause there. When he says, just as I have loved you, he's including getting down on his hands and knees and washing their feet, but he's also talking about the last 3 years of ministry together. That they had witnessed, that he said, I came not to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. They saw his humility, they saw his posture through those years, and then they now just saw it play out in washing their feet. He goes, the same way that I loved you, I want you to go and love one another. Now just pause. When we hear love, we connect it to an American version of love, which is often connected to emotions. And so we think of love in the context of feeling good about someone, feeling fondness toward them, maybe even romantic love. That's not what Jesus is talking about. This is agape love, and a better understanding of this is to be committed to better someone else's life. It has very little to do with emotions, it has to do with a mental commitment. And so he's saying, I want you to be committed to better the lives of people around you. And then in verse 35, he says, by being committed to love people, by being committed to better their lives, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. So it's not a feeling, it's an action. It's a choice to be committed. That no matter what, I'm just committed to bettering your life. Now, here's the problem with this, especially in our mindset, is we go, wait a second, you're saying I have to be committed to love before I even know the people? How can I commit to love someone without knowing how they will act? And you know how you can do that? You can keep Jesus in mind, because Jesus committed to loving you knowing how you would act, knowing you would be the worst, because you and me are the worst at times. Knowing that we would betray him and disobey him and be selfish and put our attention and worship toward other things. And in spite of knowing that with certainty, Jesus was committed to better our lives. That Philippians 2 says it this way, that though being fully God, so being in heaven, he did not see equality with God as something to grasp or to fight for, but instead took the form of his creation, coming down to earth to humble himself, to serve humanity, to give his life on the cross so that all of us can have our forgiveness of sins. So what was Jesus willing to do? To be committed to our betterment, even knowing we would fail him and let him down. So how can we be committed to people around us before we even know what they're going to do? Because that's what Jesus did for us. He's our example. How can we commit to people knowing they're going to do unloving things? How can we stay committed even after they do unloving things again? The same way that Jesus did, as a commitment. We can put our attention toward him, that Jesus still loves us even though we do unloving things. I was listening to a pastor this week, and he said something that I'm just gonna steal. I love it, okay? His name is Pastor Stanley out of Atlanta, but this is what he said. He said, you've all heard of the golden rule. It's found in Matthew 7. Do for others as you would have them do for you. Like we teach this in our children's ministry, do for others as you would have them do for you. That's the golden rule. He goes, but do you know what the platinum rule is? Do for others as Jesus has done for you, as he's already done. And I love that. I really anticipated more response in the room, but that's cool. Maybe it'll hit you later and you'll go, that's good, right? But do for others as Jesus has already done for you. This is our calling, to love people. And so the action that we're called to is to be committed to better everyone. Just being committed to better everyone. How does this play out? Well, there's different ways that this is mentioned in Scripture. Let me just show you a few of those who were like closest to Jesus. The Apostle Paul, who had this radical transformation when he met the resurrected Jesus. I love how he words it in Ephesians 5 verse 21. He says, submitting to one another out of reverence or respect for Christ. His calling is, and he's talking really to people who are professing faith, but he says, here's the posture you should take. You should submit to everyone around you. And submitting means to put their needs and their desires as a priority over yours. He goes, how can you do this? You can do this out of respect for Jesus because, again, it's exactly what he did. And so in our consumer culture tells us to go to church with the mindset, what can I get out of it? What can the church provide for me? And he goes, hey, do you know a better way to operate? Instead of having that mindset, go to church with the mindset that I just want to figure out what everyone else needs and I want to serve them. And he says when the Christian community does this, it becomes this incredibly safe and healthy and vibrant place. Well, one of the things I've learned in my marriage is that when I take a posture to serve Mary, our marriage is always better versus if I take a posture to argue for my rights. Even this past year when Mary and I did some marriage counseling, when we went to the counseling, I just prayed and said to God, God, show me me. Don't show me Mary. Don't show me her faults. Don't show me anything else because I didn't need to know that. I wanted to know me. How was I disappointing her? How was I failing her? How was I not being a loving husband? Because here's what I know. When I take a posture to serve her, in my experience, she gives that right back. And oftentimes she's the one leading the way, loving me first. When Mary loves me and puts my needs as a priority, I would do anything for her. And it's just the way that we're designed to be. And Paul goes, how about doing that in life? How about doing that in the church? It's just looking around saying, how can I serve here? Here's another way that Paul worded it to the church in Rome. This is such a cool imagery. He goes, this is Romans 12:10. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Like he's like, make it a competition. Outdo each other in showing honor. And if you actually look at that in the Greek, the idea is to highly value someone, to raise their value. And that's literally what he's saying, like what he worded other way in the other place. He's just saying, just make them a priority. And so in your life, look at someone and instead of going, what can you provide for me? Ask yourself, what can I do for them? How can I love them? How can I serve them? And so the summary is the action we're being called to is that in every thought and action, operate for the good of people. And this is something that God has shown me throughout the years, something that has become a huge priority for me. And I say this without any trying to build my own ego. But one of the highest priorities I have as the lead pastor is to serve our staff. And I'm really confident if you talk to them, they would say that they've experienced that. I go out of my way to think and to pray about how I can serve them. I pray for them by name. I have a list in my phone as often as I can. I pray for them at least once a week. I talk with each one of them. I know what's going on in their lives. I take notes based on what they say in places that I'm at so that I can know exactly what's going on so I can follow up with them. I want to love them. You know why? I want to love them. I want to serve them because I know they're going to do that to all the people they lead. And it's going to trickle down all throughout our church. So if we will take this posture, this is what Jesus is calling us to. This is what Paul explains to us. But then we know this. We all know this. Even when we understand our calling to fight for the health of the church, even when we have the action of loving each other, living for their betterment, we know there will be moments where people hurt us, where people disappoint us, where things have to be addressed. So how do we do that? What's the response to those moments? And this is what I want to reframe. In our culture today, one of the most popular sayings is church hurt. People will hashtag church hurt. And what they're talking about oftentimes is an organization, a church structure that has hurt them. But this is what I want to clarify. When a Christian community lets you down, it's not church hurt, it's relational hurt. Someone has let you down. A group of someones has let you down. And the reason why that matters is Jesus tells us how to treat people. Jesus tells us what to do when a person has hurt us, when a person has let us down. And the first thing I want to go to is 1 Peter. This is another close follower of Jesus. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8. He says it this way. He says, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. That Peter, a close follower of Jesus, says, let me tell you how to operate when there's going to be tension in relationships. And he's talking to a community at this time that was facing incredible persecution. And I think we know this, when communities get persecuted, it's really easy for them to turn on themselves, turn on each other. And he's saying, guys, we have to be focused to love one another, to be purposed in this, because love covers a multitude of sins. And I want you just to think about who this is who's speaking. This is Peter. And Peter, his last night of the Last Supper, in that one night, this is just one night of Peter's behavior. At the dinner, when Jesus got down to wash his feet, he rebuked Jesus. He said, I'm not having you wash my feet. Like, he's putting Jesus in his place. That same night, he goes and Jesus says, will you stay awake with me? He falls asleep 3 separate times when Jesus was in his greatest moment of need. When Peter wakes up, he pulls out a sword and tries to kill a man. Takes a swing, cuts off his ear. And can we all agree he wasn't aiming for the ear? He was aiming for his head. He was going to kill a man. Then he goes and follows Jesus, and he denies him 3 times before morning. That's one night for Peter. So when Peter says love covers a multitude of sins, he's a recipient of that. He realized that Jesus, even though he kept sinning over and over, chose to give him love. Because before any of that happened, this is what Jesus said to Peter. He said, Peter, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that after you recover, you will be the leader of the other disciples. Jesus says, I know what you're about to do. You're about to have the worst night of your life. You're about to fail me. You're about to do all types of things that should hurt me. But I just want you to know, before you ever do this, I'm still committed to you. Love's going to cover a multitude of your sins. And Peter says the same thing to us. When we have a posture of love first, what that means is that love refuses to magnify every offense. Love does not make every irritation, failure, awkward comment, or immaturity into a war. It chooses patience over constant outrage. Love does not endlessly expose, shame, gossip, weaponize someone's failures. What love does is it moves toward forgiveness. It doesn't keep score. And when we are committed to love, I want you just to hear me. When we are committed to love, what that means then, we are safe to address the issue. And this is what Peter is saying. This is what Jesus is saying. Because we all know this, at least I think we do. I think in our lives what we know is that when we are trying to win an argument, we both listen and speak differently than when we're trying to win the relationship. Is that fair? When we're trying to win an argument, we speak and listen differently than when we're trying to win the relationship. And so what Jesus says is when you have a heart of love, a heart where you're committed to better someone's life, he goes, when someone offends you, this is what you do. This is Matthew 18:15. If your brother, and he's not talking about biological brother, he's just talking about a person in community. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. You have won the relationship. Again, going back, if someone sins against you, instead of going to rage, instead of going to division, instead of gossip, he goes, in a heart of love, go to them alone. And go with this posture of love, because when you go in love, you will speak differently, you will listen differently. And I'm gonna explain that in a moment. And in another place, in Matthew 5:23, before this, Jesus said, so if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. And I love this imagery. Jesus goes, at any moment in your life, you realize there's conflict with someone, go to them. If you're mad at them, go to them. If they're mad at you, go to them. And when you go in a posture of love, this is how it plays out differently, at least in my experience. When I'm trying to win an argument, when I'm trying to fight for my rights, I listen to destroy your argument. I listen for weak points in your argument so that I can come back with an awesome comeback where I can point out where your argument is weak, where it fails. I listen for ways to sting you when I'm trying to win an argument. And when I speak, I'm speaking to destroy what you just said. And so I listen to destroy, I speak to destroy, I speak to put you on the defensive, I speak to show you my strength, I speak to show you my perceived wisdom, because that's what I do in my flesh. It's like that's how I'm wired. But when I'm trying to win a relationship, when I'm operating in love, I listen to hear your heart. I listen to discover what is really wounded in you, what I've done to let you down, what I've done to fail, what I can do to change so that I can make it safer. When I'm listening in order to win the relationship, so I want to fight for the relationship, when I speak, I'm trying to lessen the distance. I'm trying to create safety so that you will approach me, so that we can talk through, because I know that to win an argument and to lose a relationship is a net loss. Nobody wins when one person wins an argument. But when both people can come together and they can speak in love and respect and honor to each other, submitting to each other's needs, and that relationship can be restored, then everyone wins. And this is what Jesus was saying. He's designed his body, the church, to operate this way. That every single person goes, here's my calling. I am responsible to fight for the health of this body. My action is that I'm going to love. I'm going to be committed to better everyone else's life. And when there's an offense, and inevitably, everyone hear me, inevitably there will be an offense. But when there's an offense, in love, I'm going to go to the person. And I'm going to listen to love. I'm going to speak to love so that there can be true reconciliation. Because like I've said, inevitably, you're going to be hurt by the church. But the world's method of cancel culture makes everyone the victim and everyone hurts. But Jesus' method gives everyone hope again. In my experience, when we as Christians will fight for the health of the church, then we truly become the unstoppable force. And it's a safe place for us to grow, to be encouraged, to become more like Jesus. But ultimately, we make that choice. Will you bow your head so I can pray for you? Jesus, I thank you that you have designed us to need community. You've designed us to love and to be loved. But also there's a brokenness inside of each one of us, that we have a nature that is selfish, we have a nature that is broken. And so at times that gets distorted. At times we become so focused on our own wants and desires that we lose sight of love, we lose sight of relationships. And so today, may this be a reminder for all of us. At both our campuses, help us to be people that are committed to each other, committed to the body. And when there is conflict, may we go in love, creating safety so that we all can respond, so that we can love each other better and the body as a whole can be healthier. Jesus, I know a lot of people in this room have been hurt over the years. Will you bring healing to their hurt? Will you bring healing to the wounds that are still in their lives so that they can love well? Jesus, we thank you, we give you glory, and we pray this in your precious name. Amen.